That's the first part, right? Just helping
Step
them
one.
understand and teach them that basic. And then help them in that conversation retroactively connect the dots. What we're missing is that underlying feeling of shame before addressing the behavior or the mistake is a growing moment.
Welcome to Lulubug's podcast for parents, where we empower you with the tools to help children become confident, resilient, and ready for life's adventures. Hosted by creator of Lulubug's Garden, Jil Hunter, and child psychiatrist, Dr. Karen Minotis.
Today we're talking about the big emotion of shame. And every parent has experienced the moment when a child comes home feeling ashamed of something, and it's such a heavy feeling, and it's really hard on a parent to witness. In our Lulubug's Garden episode of shame, we have Kirby, who accidentally breaks Willow's very, very favorite snow globe that she was so proud of bringing for the show and tell. And he breaks it and is just feeling so much shame that he did that.
And how did it look like for Kirby in the show?
Kirby was just so sad he did that. He ran away. He was extremely devastated and full of shame.
I think watching your child feel that intense emotion of shame after doing something that was truly a mistake most of the time is really hard, and it's really heavy for us as caregivers. In fact, on the flip side, if we don't realize that that's the emotion that they're feeling and we really just see the mistake, oftentimes we end up overcorrecting or asking them to apologize or saying, hey, look at me, when they're looking down or want to run away like Kirby did. And what we're missing is that underlying feeling of shame before addressing the behavior or the mistake is a growing moment. So maybe let's start like we usually do, talking about the brain science of where shame comes from, what's going on in the brain. We're going to talk about a new area of the brain today, along with some familiar ones that you may have heard from other podcasts or from our show, which is the anterior insula. The anterior insula kind of lays in between that front part of your brain and the parietal, the side part of your brain, right in that fold, but right in front of the deep limbic system, which is where your amygdala lies, really deep in your brain. It's really close to it. The reason it's important and relevant for shame is that that's the part of the brain that is activated by social rejection. So when a child does something, spills milk everywhere or breaks mom's favorite vase
Yes, which
by
does happen.
accident,
Yeah.
that fear of someone being upset with them because they did something wrong, even if it was by accident, really activates that anterior insula, which acts as a bridge between emotions and physical pain. So you know that feeling when I don't know, when you feel ashamed of like that painful sinking stomach feeling,
Yeah.
that comes directly from your anterior insula. It's how their brain sort of translates emotions to physical sensations, which is so common for young kids, especially that they feel their emotions through their body.
Well, I was going to just say too, and it's so common for young children, especially, to have mishaps like that happening all the time.
Right. And if you think about their development during this 3 to 6 year old phase, kids are really striving to become competent. So
Yeah.
they're gaining skills, they're learning how to do things, and a lot of times they mess up, right? Like it's bound to happen. It makes sense. They're learning, but it really can cause feelings of shame if they're not acquiring that competency like they would hope that they would. That activation of the anterior insula in the brain that we briefly talked about signals to the brain's alarm system, which is the amygdala that's very close by but deeper in the brain structure. And the amygdala actually senses the threat. Typically the threat is something scary or a physical threat, right? Is the, I guess, traditional threat that we think of. But for them, the threat is losing attachment and love
Oh,
because of a mistake in those
okay.
moments. And so the amygdala's alarm goes off, danger, 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 based on this activation. And that's where our fight or flight response comes in. And instead of fight, kids in these moments end up resorting to the flight. So that's why a lot of kids, when they feel that shame, tend to want to hide or run away from the situation or shrink as small as they can so nobody sees them and
Yeah.
disappear.
Yeah, it feels like in that moment they just do not want to be there. So they do whatever they possibly can to just not be seen or just truly run away like Kirby did.
Right. And that's an actual physiologic response.
Okay.
Because the prefrontal cortex, that front part of their brain is still really underdeveloped. It doesn't fully develop until their mid-20s, and that's in charge of, rational thinking and problem solving. Kids tend to have really like binary thinking, meaning it's not like X plus Y equals Z, but maybe something else. It's
Yeah.
like black and white. So that part of their brain ends up in those moments thinking, oh, I broke it. I'm a bad person. And that
Oh.
kind of translates
So this
to
is a very big emotion for a child,
it is.
especially not being able to have that frontal cortex to help them see this through. So it almost gives out that feeling of, oh, I'm not good enough. I'm
Right.
bad.
Right. So it's so important that we as caregivers can learn to support kids through these moments so that it doesn't become part of their core identity.
Okay, we're so ready to learn this. All of us. I know the
Yes.
parents out there are. I am.
Yes. Well, and one last piece that I didn't talk about, which is the important piece of like how it looks, right?
Okay, yes.
Through the activation of the amygdala, that fight or flight response, right? We also get adrenaline and stress hormones released throughout the body in the nervous system. And what this ends up doing is it ends up redirecting your blood flow. So that's where you see like the flushed face, where kids can get
Oh,
like,
yeah. The red
not kids,
face.
all of us can get like
Yes.
flushed. Um, and then also a drop in postural muscle tone, which is where you see that shoulder slumping, their head down. That's
Mhm.
actually all modulated by these chemical responses as a result of what happens in the brain initially. So that's kind of how some of the things that you see in a child who's feeling ashamed
So
looks.
definitely telling a child, hey, look at me. It's not what they really can do in that moment.
It's not beneficial
Yes.
in the moment, but really it's almost subconscious for them. One is this incongruence of
Hmm.
this like inappropriate or nervous laughter.
Okay, I actually do. Yes, I have a child that does more react that way to
Uh-huh.
situations like that. It's the laughter. And because it's not my own emotion, like that's not how I react to shame.
Hmm.
It's almost, I couldn't understand why would you laugh in this moment?
Right.
Like in my world, that would be like exactly the opposite what you should be doing.
Right.
So it's interesting when you need to learn that this is just their reaction to that same feeling.
Right. It's that nervous, forceful almost laughter.
Yeah.
And so when parents oftentimes like will see that in response to, you know, breaking something or their mistake or their
Hmm.
behavior that caused that, it, it makes us feel, I'd feel like frustrated, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes angry. And then that's really where I think it's important to understand that there's still shame there, even if you're seeing a response that doesn't look like your classic shame, right?
Hmm.
That forceful laughter is a very common way that we see in young children shame in their affect, in their behavior. And that doesn't mean that they're happy about it. It's
Hmm.
just a nervous
Or
response.
that they don't care.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And so often we'll jump in and correct the behavior because it seems like they don't care
Yeah.
rather than pausing and addressing the emotion first, the experience
Yeah.
first.
It seems like that's a nat I mean, we've all heard it before, even like being in a restaurant somewhere, someone talking to you, their child or something where they're normally, where they respond more like, oh, don't laugh now, or why are you laughing?
Mhm.
Or
That's inappropriate.
yeah, exactly.
Right. And in fact, correcting that behavior
Hmm.
without addressing that underlying emotion essentially punishes a brain that's panicking.
Oh, that's actually so
I
sad.
know. And so what that can
Yeah.
inadvertently do, which we obviously want to do everything we can to avoid, is drive the roots of shame as
Hmm.
part of their self-worth and
Yeah.
their identity. So kids at this age don't have the emotional vocabulary yet to say, I'm feeling incredibly exposed right now. right? That like
Yeah.
vulnerable feeling of like, oh, like, wow, I just did something really bad and I'm feeling really vulnerable and exposed and ashamed, right? That's a really deep feeling to be able to articulate, and they can't. So the way it comes out is kind of what you mentioned. So they can be running away or like hiding
Hmm.
under a blanket, or negative self talk, like, I'm awful. Don't look at me. I'm terrible. Again, right? That binary thinking
Yeah.
from their underdeveloped prefrontal cortex and then everything else that's going on in the brain with the shame.
Well, like I just was thinking when you were saying that, that it seems to correlate too with how the reaction of the people that were around was too. Like it kind of, I mean, they know they did something bad, but if somebody, even the sound of somebody like, oh, why did you do that? Or, like if it depends a little of how people were reacting to it towards the situation of how then in return they are reacting to it too.
That's very true. I mean, especially in the younger kids,
Yeah.
they're observing everything so intently and bringing in all of that information and processing as, like, okay, this is how I need to be feeling based
Hmm.
on how I'm observing a response from the adult in my life.
Yeah. So as parents, what can we do?
So, you really want to teach that physical feeling ahead of time. So, what does shame feel like in your body? Again, kids experience their emotions so strongly in their body. And that can be like that hot face, that flushed face, like a sinking feeling in their
Mhm.
belly, or that like feeling of wanting to hide or just fully disappear. That's the first part, right? Just helping them
Step
like
one.
understand and teach them that basic. And then help them in that conversation retroactively connect the dots between that physical feeling and maybe an experience they've had recently or in the past that they were feeling those things. So,
Mhm.
for example, do you remember that one time that you made X mistake, right?
Mhm.
I wonder if your body was feeling hot, feeling like it wanted to hide, and then just say, we call that shame. And we all experience that sometimes when we mess up.
And that's really where this show itself can become very handy again to use it as a tool.
Lulubug's garden show is actually so, so, so great. And I've done it already with my own son, just guiding questions based on the experience of the characters. You could also use books. You can do
Mhm.
role playing with stuffed animals or plushies. And that actually can even make it easier, especially for the younger kids, because it removes that I and makes it easier to talk about through like a third person
That makes
experience.
sense. Yeah.
Once you've done that, making sure that you teach separation of behavior and identity, right? So, teaching them that even when we make choices that sometimes aren't safe or aren't the best choice,
Mhm.
you're still a good kid. Just because you broke my vase doesn't mean that you're not a good helper.
Helper. Yeah. And I would like you to help me again.
Right. So you can show them that you trust them and they gain that confidence, and they ultimately gain the competency that they really need to gain in this developmental period, even if it's like perceived of, okay, I can actually help my mom clean the house without breaking something.
Like, let's say we were at a restaurant. This was for a little birthday party. And one of the little grandkids, and this happens probably all the time, and waitresses, waiters see this all the time, knocks over his glass of apple juice, let's say, and it goes everywhere, spills everywhere, and they feel so ashamed that they just did this. Like, what's happening in those moments, and can you react in those moments to help your child quickly feel safe again and okay?
The important thing here is in the moment, pause. Just always pause before you react.
Mm.
Take a deep breath and resist the urge to correct the behavior right away.
So don't react, but respond.
Right. Make sure that the everybody's dry and we figure out the situation really
Yeah.
quickly. Then drop down, look at them in the eye. They may not want to look at you in the eye. This is very normal, right? People in general will resist looking at you in the eye when they're feeling ashamed, and that's a normal response. That's a normal physiologic response.
Yeah, so Kirby in this episode does not ever want to see Willow again, even though it's one of his best friends. He just doesn't want to ever have to look her in the eye again.
Right. We call it a biological shield of
Hmm.
like same idea, right? Of flight, right? Trying
Yeah.
to run away, hide, just disappear. And so that's sort of part of not wanting to look at caregivers or whoever it is in the eye in moments of feeling ashamed. And what I always tell parents is it's good to allow that. Try not to at least force them to say, hey, look at me in the eye when I'm talking to you, because I feel like I say that all the time to my child.
Well, or even in those moments, like saying, "Oh, go tell 'em sorry," like
Yes.
immediately, right then, because you kind of feel like that should happen fast.
Hmm. Right. And so we want to avoid getting there. Like,
Mhm.
absolutely, we need to get to that point,
Mhm.
right? But in that moment, it's not quite the right time.
Okay.
And so we want to try to avoid intimidating the child in that moment. They're already like internally panicking.
Yeah.
And instead, say something like, I'm right here with you, even in the mess. And know that just because they spilled at that restaurant, you love them still, and that
Always.
will not change based
Mm.
on their mishap.
Yeah.
That takes me to my next point, which is keep it brief and offer absolute safety. No lessons right now of like,
Mhm.
okay, next time, what did I tell you about keeping your
Well, I
hands?
already told you so last time this happened,
Yes,
or why is this happening
yes.
again?
But instead, keep it brief. Say, hey, that was a mistake. We can handle this together.
Yeah.
It may sound really simple, but it is really hard to do in the
Yeah.
moment, especially like you said, when there's other things going on. And if they need to, let's say they're like hiding under a blanket
Mhm.
or they're underneath the chair, like crouched up, let them hide. It's okay. That's again their flight response. So you can sit there, do not drag them out of their shield in that
Mhm.
moment. Allow them to have that place to feel safe while you sit there with them quietly nearby.
In that moment, it seems to that parents, just because they are reacting, not responding sometimes, especially if it's like in a situation where there are groups or other people or maybe someone important around, that they might actually make the feeling of shame worse by shaming the child even more.
Sort of
It
like what you were
feels like
talking about
some
earlier, where where we sometimes we can be like, "Didn't I tell you
exactly
last
like that.
time?
It
Like,
just doesn't seem
keep your
like
hands to
somehow that
yourself." Or
naturally comes out.
right,
Yes.
right, and we definitely want as much as we can to control that urge. So once that emotional processing and safety has been established for the child, um, is the right time, and they're a little bit more calm, then that's the right time to address the mistake or the behavior and allow them to repair it with you instead of saying, "Okay, now you have to clean this all up because you spilled it." It actually is a lot more helpful for them for you to say, "Okay, we're gonna clean this up together now," and make sure that they are an active participator in that process. And then that's also a good time, again, when we talk about repairing, it may not be cleaning it up, but another way of repairing could be apologizing if, they broke something that was someone else's and they're upset about it, or if they spilled on somebody, giving them the opportunity to apologize. And again, it's okay if they're not ready to look at them in the eye. It's okay if they're not ready to be super close, but allowing them the opportunity, and you can even say, hey, I'll walk with you and I'll hold your hand to repair the mistake once they're feeling a little bit more calm.
Yeah, I like that in the episode as well, too, how Kirby's not quite ready to say sorry yet, but then kind of just by acting it out a little bit, like saying, oh, this is what I could say, and learning what to say, and then going back to Willow and actually apologizing and her accepting the apology and him feeling so much better about it.
I think that closing the loop with
Hmm.
repairing is super critical. We don't want to leave that out. We just want to make sure that we give space in between for the child to feel supported, loved, and process what they're experiencing in their body. The other thing is for kids that are a little bit older, it also can be helpful to use um, like an analogy of mistakes as a draft.
Hmm.
So, saying things like, this was just the first draft, and we can have a second draft or another try later on. And that just allows them to understand that this is how we learn and this is how we grow. But it's harder to do that, the analogy and some of the guided imagery pieces with kids that are 3. But once they're 4, 5, 6, they're more able to, and that can be a really good tool.
Okay, I'm going to give you like an example right now, and you tell me, because I just feel like it's happened a few times with different kids at different performances. But let's say they have a little performance at school or a dance recital or something, and you just see your child up there and you know they just did something wrong that they didn't mean to do wrong. And you can just see in their body language that they are feeling a lot of shame. but you can't help them or talk them through it or anything in that moment. How would you prepare a child for situations like that?
That can be really difficult, especially if they're on a stage and they don't have access to
Yes.
you in the moment. And that's really where this early
Preparation.
preparation ahead of
Uh-huh.
time, where you can teach them that the feeling in their body,
Hmm.
connect the dots to the emotion, and help them regulate so that when they're in a situation like that, where maybe they don't have access to you or a trusted adult, they can identify it and cope in the
Hmm.
moment. And that's definitely going to take lots of practice
Yes.
and talking about it several times, but we want to get to a point where we provide emotional safety and they
Hmm.
can get to feeling that emotional safety as well before any lessons can be taught.
When I know even like when they see you in the audience or someone see your eyes or just take a deep breath,
Mm,
that already makes them feel a lot calmer and that you can talk about it after too.
absolutely. I do also want to just point out a few red flags of like,
Oh,
when is
yes.
this something that is more than just regular shame? And maybe is this starting to affect kind of their self esteem and their self worth? Red flags that might be happening is if your child is regularly having negative self talk. They're saying, I'm just so dumb. I'm just so stupid. Or I can't do anything right. I'm not
Yeah.
a, that less so, right? Like of a situational,
Hmm.
but that it's regularly happening,
Yeah.
then I would say that's a pretty big red flag. Other things would be if there's like prolonged, intense meltdowns over small mistakes, especially if it includes like aggression towards others or aggression towards themselves, like hitting, biting, banging their head on the wall can be common in kids that become that dysregulated. I would say that's a
Hmm.
red flag to seek out sort of next steps and get an evaluation. And then also, lastly, but not least, like if you notice that now they're completely avoiding trying new things or doing things that they like to do because they're so scared of making a mistake or
Yeah.
failing, and that's becoming, again, a pattern, then I would say that's also another sign that parents should seek out sort of an evaluation or just some more information about what could be going on. And I
And
think
how to help your child then in those
exactly,
situations.
exactly. And a pediatrician is a wonderful place to start if your child already has a pediatrician or if you can find one in your area.
So, in summary, we really learned from you that shame can look very different in different situations. Sometimes it can look like leashing out or running away or hiding under a blanket or even laughter. So, what helps is sitting side by side with your child and just waiting until they're ready. Don't forcing them into doing something they're not ready for yet. Wait until they're ready to look into your eye. Don't make them look into your eyes. Build the vocabularies with them in calm moments. Prepare them for what shame could feel like and be like, and fix the mistake after together. Help your child find a solution.
And we know that children who learn that
Hmm.
their mistakes and their shortcomings do not cost them their caregivers or their trusted adults love and attachment
Hmm.
have much better success at growing into resilient adults that can face life's challenges with unshakable self worth.
Hmm. And I just want to add to that to always let your child know how much you love them and how good enough they always are because they just are. And I'm so thankful we got to talk about this today, Karen. Thank you so much for listening today. And a special thanks to Cozy Earth for providing us with a beautiful blanket. Especially my favorite is one of their cashmere blankets right here on the table. Thanks for coming today, and we'll see you next week.